Hello everybody, and welcome back to Steven's Fight Show. Alright, so last weekend we've had a few fights happen, and one of the few fights that did occur was Lomachenko versus Jamaine Ortiz. Now this was a fight that I was personally excited about because I wanted to see Lomachenko back in action. I was supposed to also make a prediction video on this fight, but because I got caught up with all the UFC stuff, and I also got busy with the Jake Paul video, I just didn't have enough time to cram it in. But now that the fight is already over, let's discuss all about it. So Lomachenko has finally returned back into the boxing scene after being in a war for about almost a year. And in terms of boxing ability right now, a lot of people have mixed opinions about him. Lomachenko, he was once considered one of the best fighters and the best lightweight in the world. And with how his career was panning out, at one point Lomachenko was projected to be the undisputed champion of this division. And obviously there's a reason for that, because his Ukrainian boxing style, where he throws unorthodox combinations, he uses his footwork, he uses good feints, he has good angle switches. And if you combine pacing with that, it really gives people problems because it's a style that most usually don't see. However, just 2 years ago, one loss from Teofimo Lopez completely changed the picture for Loma and the lightweight division, and now people believe that he doesn't have what it takes to achieve the undisputed title. And a large reason for that is because of his last performance against Jamaine Ortiz. Jamaine Ortiz, he's a solid competitor who's on the come up right now, and he gave Loma a tougher fight than most expected. So because of that, concerns are starting to rise about Lomachenko's competitiveness in this division. And in my opinion, it was certainly a different fight than what most expected, considering that Loma opened up as a huge favorite to win this fight. I believe he was a negative 2,500 to win this fight, which is crazy now knowing how the fight played out. And this fight, it wasn't even supposed to be a competitive fight for Loma, especially coming off of an almost 1 year layoff. This was supposed to be a fight for Loma for him to jump back into the pool. And considering how good Loma is, people were looking at bigger fights for him against Dev, Tank, Ryan Garcia, or maybe even Shakur Stevenson. But again, many people believe that he's no longer as dangerous as he used to be because of his last performance. So what happened in this fight between Loma and Ortiz? Let's talk all about it. So pretty much in the first 4 rounds of the fight, Ortiz was imposing his youth and his conditioning by keeping Loma occupied by his output. Ortiz, he was continuously pumping the jab, and he was throwing 4, 5, or maybe even 6 punch combinations where he would start up top and then rip the body, or vice versa. Ortiz is a fighter that loves to thrive off of activity, and because Loma is known for being a slow starter for the beginning of the fight, he was giving up a lot of ground and a lot of space for Ortiz to continue to work. Loma was letting Ortiz be very confident with boxing him at range. Ortiz, being the bigger man, was able to keep Loma at range with his combination punching and his output. So this forced Loma to be a bit more defensive than he wanted to, and another thing that Ortiz was doing very well was using his footwork to combat Loma's angle switches. And on top of that, he was also using his physicality inside of the clinch. There were so many instances when Loma would try to get around Ortiz's lead foot. Ortiz would try to be one step ahead of Loma and change his angle before Loma can throw any punches. And the uppercuts inside the clinch for Ortiz was money in the bank. In my opinion, it showed that he was the bigger, stronger, and the younger man in this fight. The counterwork by Ortiz where he was slipping and throwing uppercuts to the body was nasty as well. And not to mention, he was defending very well, having his back up against the ropes in the early rounds. His guard and his footwork was what really allowed him to avoid any danger that Lomachenko was bringing. And in the middle of the fight, from rounds 5 through 8, Ortiz was starting to slow down a little bit because of his volume in the early rounds. And this gave Loma a lot of opportunities to come forward, throw combinations, work the body, and stop Ortiz's momentum in this fight. And even though Loma was trying to find his rhythm, Ortiz did well to continue to hold his own. Ortiz, he never went away during this fight, and he was still the aggressor, putting it on Loma in the 7th and the 8th round. And then come the championship rounds, and this is where you see Loma really using his experience and his IQ compared to Ortiz, where he's a young fighter and he really doesn't have any championship experience under his belt. This is usually when you see Loma have his best work, is in the later rounds. This is how he fights. There's a reason why he starts slow for a majority of his fights. In the later rounds, Loma was the one who was being the aggressor, cutting off the ring, closing the distance, and throwing combinations to the body, and then coming upstairs, blitzing in with a flurry of punches, and countering Ortiz when he would get lazy. And in my opinion, he was doing a bit of what Ortiz was doing to Loma early on, but he flipped the script on Ortiz in the later rounds. Ortiz's work rate started to decrease in the later rounds, which was to be expected. I mean, how can you throw 500 punches in a fight and not be tired? Like, that's just impossible. The fight ends and a close competitive fight from both men. Loma was able to dig deep and get right back to where he needs to be, and Ortiz, he had an amazing performance where he showed the world what he's made of. And in my opinion, there's no reason why Ortiz should be ashamed of his performance whatsoever. So Loma ends up winning a unanimous decision, and even though Loma won the fight, in my opinion, this win could have looked a bit more pretty. I thought in the early rounds he shouldn't have given too much space for Ortiz to come forward. You know, obviously he's a slow starter, but I felt like he didn't land enough clean and damaging shots in the early rounds for him to start that slow. I feel like you need to have a reason to start slow, because once you start slow, it could be a habit. And against a guy like Ortiz, who's fast, explosive, conditioned, and he likes to throw volume, you can't give him a lot of confidence to come forward, because eventually it becomes a long night for you. Your plan shouldn't be to discourage him, but instead, what you need to do is you need to give him a reason why he shouldn't come forward. You need to give him a reason why he shouldn't continue to put it on you. And something that Loma was trying to do was attack after Ortiz threw combos, but what he needed to do was disrupt Ortiz's offense. Loma was just resetting and stepping out of range every single time Ortiz would attack, and that's not going to stop Ortiz from doing what he's doing. Loma needed to land a flush, hard, clean shot or attack the body early on to slow down Ortiz's engine. Again, going back to Loma giving Ortiz a reason to not do what he wants to do. And at times, it did look a little concerning for Loma early on, but it's definitely not something that Loma hasn't seen or been a part of. Usually, Loma's opponents have the most success early on, so in this fight, it wasn't really so surprising that Ortiz was getting the better of Loma in the early rounds. And Ortiz, he was winning about 2/3 of the fight until the championship rounds came. In my opinion, through 8 rounds, he should have been up on the scorecards. He started so quick that he started to fade in the later rounds, and him not having any experience of being that deep in the fight doesn't make it any better for him. I think he was outclassed in terms of experience, and although he was making adjustments throughout the entire fight, like there was one instance during the fight where he was switching southpaw and throwing different combos, but he failed to adjust to the one thing that Loma was continuing to have success with, and it's the 2-1. Loma is known for this combination where he leads with the left and he comes over the top with the right jab. And this isn't considered a textbook combination, but it's very effective if you know how to use it. And if you're somebody that has been boxing for a long time, you're used to seeing typical combinations. You're used to seeing a 1-2-3, a 2-3, a 3-2, a 1-2, but a 2-1 could throw you off if you've never seen it before, because the backhand is usually the power hand, but for Loma it acts as the setup to the right jab over the top, and Ortiz was not able to defend against it. Loma, he was closing down the range with this combo all night, and Ortiz was getting caught with it continuously in the later rounds. So yeah, overall it was a good competitive fight for both men. So now that this fight is over, people are wondering what's next for Loma. And fans feel like that the potential fight between Devin Haney and Lomachenko is no longer as competitive as it should have been. And personally, in my opinion, I still feel like Loma would give Haney a run for his money. But realistically, if I had to pick, I think early predictions, Dev would probably beat Loma right now if that's the next fight. Just because of the momentum and how Dev's been looking in his last few fights. And for me, I think Loma needs a few more fights to fight for the Undisputed title, because even though I love Loma in his style, I'm just not confident that he can beat Dev with the way that he performed against Ortiz. A lot of what Ortiz did to Loma, I believe Dev could replicate it in his own way. And I think Dev, he would be able to get the better of Loma in terms of boxing strategically. And Loma, he's been out of the ring for a while. There's obviously some rust, and I think it's best if he doesn't fight Dev immediately. Instead, he should have like one more fight where he puts up a more impressive performance, and that's where we can start looking at the Undisputed conversation. They say styles make fights, so hopefully they can make this fight happen, because both guys, they have great styles, and for them to match up against each other, it would be an amazing fight for fans to watch. And that is it, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to what I have to say, and let me know, do you think Lomachenko can beat Devin Haney right now? Are you impressed with what Lomachenko did in his last fight? Drop a comment and let me know in the comment section down below. Now, if you guys enjoy content that is related to combat sports, please drop a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel down below. That would be greatly appreciated. And other than that, it's been Steven, signing out. Peace!